Okay, I thought I'd just share some thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. There won't be any real spoilers, but if you haven't watched any of the trailers and somehow still know nothing about the movie a few weeks after it's come out, there probably will be some minor spoilers. But as long as you know the overall premise, it should be fine. And if I do talk spoilers, I'll let you know ahead of time. And I actually saw this movie last week, but let's just say I had a bad theater experience and I had to watch it again. And just leave it at that. And overall, I think the movie was outstanding. I thought it was a pretty brilliant conclusion for the Guardians of the Galaxy as we know them. And I think James Gunn really did a great job. And he really didn't have to. I mean, he's running the show at DC now. He could have easily phoned this one in, but he didn't. He really nailed it. And if Rocket Raccoon isn't your favorite Guardian, by the time you're done watching this movie, he will be. And it's just as fun as the other two Guardians movies, but at the same time, it's much darker. It feels more adult in a lot of ways. I definitely think there may be some kids who watch this who will be both scared and heartbroken. There are a number of really sad scenes. It actually kind of reminds me of an old school Disney movie, like Bambi, where, they aren't afraid to just whack Bambi's mom and basically just tell the audience to deal with it. It's that kind of vibe. And there's also some cruelty to animals in the movie. It's fictionalized cruelty to CGI characters that represent animals. It's important to keep that in mind, or you might lose your shit a little bit while watching this movie. And I think even with that in mind, it might be difficult for some people to watch. And a lot of the story centers around Rocket Raccoon. We get to see his origin story and how he was created and how he has a link to the main villain, High Evolutionary. And I think he's easily one of the best MCU villains so far. And by best, I almost mean he's the worst. I mean, this fucking guy is hateable. He's absolutely heinous. But of course, that's what makes his ultimate defeat so satisfying. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the animal torturing psychopath is going to go down pretty hard in this movie. There are several moments where you will say that this motherfucker has to go. And there's a great line of dialogue in the movie where Star-Lord confronts him and basically doesn't give a shit about his villain speech. He says something along the lines like he doesn't need to hear some impotent whack job talk about how his mother didn't love him or some shit. And I thought that was a great moment because he's the type of villain where you shouldn't care. He's not a sympathetic villain at all. He's absolutely awful. There's no justification for what he does. And in this movie, High Evolutionary is fairly true to how he is in the comics, at least in terms of his goals. But he's way more evil in the movie than he is in the comics, at least as far as I'm aware. Sometimes he's not even really a villain at all in the comics. But he is as bad as it gets in the movie. He's really an evil dude. And I thought it was really smart to link Rocket's origin with High Evolutionary, because it just makes sense. High Evolutionary is trying to force evolution to make the perfect society. Even in the comics, I think he evolves himself. Like, he forces evolution on himself. That's how he becomes High Evolutionary. And as a result, he's doing all these experiments on animals in the movie. And one of them is obviously Rocket Raccoon. Although another major difference between this and the comics is that in the movie, he doesn't seem to be human. He talks about Earth as though he was just a visitor. Whereas in the comics, I'm pretty sure he is human. Or he was. But correct me if I'm wrong. I'm far from an expert. And as I said, there are some really sad moments, particularly with the friends Rocket makes while he's imprisoned by High Evolutionary. If you've seen any of the trailers, I'm sure you can kind of see that coming. There are some pretty disturbing moments, considering that this is a Disney MCU movie. And I think it's funny that his friends consist of an otter, a rabbit, and a walrus. I mean, one of these things is really not like the other. It's kind of funny. And I think in the comics, Rocket has a walrus friend. I really should look some of this shit up if I'm going to talk about it, but whatever. I wonder if maybe this character is kind of a reference to that in some way. I don't know. But for me, the rabbit was really disturbing. Not only because of how it looks, but because she's also clearly not as intelligent as the others. And when shit gets scary, she really starts freaking out. And I thought that was disturbing and upsetting, if I'm being honest. But overall, I think the movie does a great job of wrapping up character arcs. Everyone really gets a nice conclusion, and I don't think there's any character that was mishandled, which is quite a feat in this day and age. And there are a few things I didn't like. I enjoy James Gunn's humor for the most part, but it can be a little hit and miss at times, let's face it. I mean, some things are hilarious, but other things are just corny. And that's going to happen when you swing for the fences. You're going to strike out every now and then. It happens. And I almost think that James Gunn is both the best and worst thing to happen to superhero movies. The best in the sense that he's a talented writer that knows how to flesh out characters and give them satisfying and logical arcs. But the worst in the sense that he's so good at what he does, a lot of MCU movies are trying to emulate what he does. And it just doesn't work as well. I mean, that last Ant-Man movie is the perfect example. That seems like something that wants to be a James Gunn type movie, but it isn't. And while I don't think it was terrible by any means, it definitely falls kind of flat and fails in a number of areas. It tries hard to hit those James Gunn jokes along with those quirky, over-the-top James Gunn visuals. And it just doesn't work, in my opinion. And this is a very minor, non-plot related spoiler, but I feel like I have to talk about it because it kind of bothered me. At one point, it's heavily implied that a planet full of people is destroyed. And we see those people. The characters interact with some of them. And I just thought that was really strange that it happens and it never feels like anything is lost. It's really just kind of glossed over. And I thought that was sort of mishandled. Then again, we never see it get destroyed, so it's possible that I missed something. I don't know. And I'm also getting really tired of this trope in superhero movies where characters talk to each other with like an earpiece that isn't there. I know it's a very minor complaint, and they've been doing it for 15 years now, so maybe I should just shut the fuck up about it. But it's getting a little nuts to me. It's like people can magically talk to each other when they're sometimes miles away from each other. I don't know. It just feels lazy when they do that. Also, a very, very minor spoiler. I thought it was weird that Star-Lord never actually wears his helmet in the movie. Really bizarre. There's even a point where he definitely could have used it and just didn't have it for some weird reason. If anyone has any thoughts on that, let me know. But I think I've yapped incoherently long enough about this movie. I do recommend it. I know everyone is saying it, but I think it's definitely the best MCU movie since Endgame. It's a great send-off for these characters, and I think the best thing about it is that it's not just a movie that sets up other movies. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's it. Which seems like such a rare thing for superhero movies these days. And I can't wait to see what James Gunn does with DC. I'm really looking forward to that. Although, I'm a little worried about how he might do Superman, because I don't think Superman is really in his wheelhouse. But I guess we'll see. And for the Space Rock rating, I gave it 4 Space Rocks out of 5. And there's 2 Vin Diesel movies out right now that are kind of all about family, right? One of them will show you and make you feel that, and the other will just tell you over and over again that it's about family until you start checking your watch. I got family. We get it. Give it a rest, Vincent Diesel. Anyway, I don't want this to become a review of that movie too, so I should probably wrap this up. To sum it up, I enjoyed the movie, and as always, if you've seen it, let me know what you thought of it. And until next time, take it easy.